All right. Hi, everyone. We are here with Emily Austin, who is the author of Interesting Facts About Space, which was Sapph-Lit's February book pick. And I'm going to give an intro to who Emily is, if you're less familiar. And then we're going to get into our questions that we had related to the book. And if you have any questions, remember to put them in the chat and we can revisit at the end. So, Emily Austin is the author of the novels Interesting Facts About Space and Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, which we read at the beginning of last year. Her debut poetry collection, Gay Girl Prayers, came out yesterday. Congratulations. She was born in St. Thomas, Ontario, Canada, and studied English literature and religious studies at King's University College and library and information science at Western University. She received 2 writing grants from the Canada Council for the Arts and has a background in libraries, teaching, and working as an information architect, very similar to our main character of this book. And then her debut, Everyone in This Room, was longlisted for the Stephen Leacock Memorial Medal for Humor, shortlisted for the Amazon First Novel Award, and a finalist for the Ottawa Book Awards. She currently resides in Ottawa / the territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. Thank you again, Emily, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so how has the publishing process been for you since your debut, Everyone in This Room? I'm so curious about the differences book over book and then also genre to genre because Interesting Facts and Gay Girl Prayers came out pretty close to each other. So can you tell more about what that was like for you?
Yeah, so those so I mean poetry publishing is very different, and it was published by a small Canadian press that's focused on Canadian poetry. So an interesting fact about space is published by Atria, which is an imprint of Simon and Schuster Canada. So it is interesting for me to be able to see what the difference is between like a small publisher and a larger publisher, and sort of the difference there. And poetry, it's hard for me to tell what's different because of poetry or because of, but yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky to have had really positive experiences so far in all my, in everything that's been published. It's a little, having these two come out really close to each other has been a little bit of something though. I mean, yeah.
Were you writing them at the same time?
I actually wrote Gay Girl Prayers quite a while ago. I wrote it while I was writing Interesting Facts About, or sorry, while I was writing Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead. Um, and it just worked out that, everything is so delayed with publishing, and the way that, yeah, so
Okay, amazing. I'm really curious because I read your essay on how you're blind in one eye, and that inspired having your main character in this book, Enid, be deaf in one ear. And there were a lot of Sapph-Lities who were curious about your experience writing a disabled MC and a deaf one specifically. And I'm wondering how this physical disability connects to your character's anxiety and autism, since both are kind of related to the inability to read, interpret, hear, see people's behaviors, and understand social cues.
yeah, so a lot of it's not completely about this obviously, but it's partially about invisible disabilities.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, when I write something, I like to think about certain experiences I've had, and
yeah.
sort of try to pick from those. And so at first I was thinking about being blind in one eye, and thinking, okay, that's an experience I've had. I could maybe write about, because I do often have this experience where I accidentally bump into people. It normally happens in grocery stores because of the aisles. That's like, and also, I have a day job where I work in like a cubicle type space, and when people come from that side, I'm like startled, like that kind of thing. It's not, and no one would know that I'm blind in one eye, so their perception of it is probably just like, "Why are you startled every time I come to your desk?" Or "Why do you bump into people into the grocery store?" Um, but yeah, so originally I was thinking of writing the character being blind in one eye, but then after writing Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, I got a lot, and I don't even care that much, but I got so much. I got this sense a lot that people thought I was Gilda, which
Mm.
I think a lot of people like that's an experience you have when you write a book, and there's certain parts of her that I am, but I was kind of like, I don't want to write a character who, it has is blind in one eye. People will, and who's an information architect, blind in one eye, and then there's a lot of overlap. So, so I decided to make her deaf in one ear, and I was able to work with a sensitivity reader on that. And that was really helpful. They gave a lot of insightful feedback about that. I saw you have 2 copies of the book, actually. This is a fun fact for the some of the differences in the edits reflect the sensitivity. I don't know if that like if it's true of all the arcs, but if you read the arc and then read this version, and you notice little subtle differences between, particularly when it comes to being deaf in one ear, those reflect some of the feedback from the sensitivity reader. So yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. What did you learn about like deafness as a disability, like while writing this, if anything?
Yeah, a lot about, like some things I had also researched, like, it was interesting to hear about how, like, different high-pitched sounds can impact you if you're deaf in one ear. Um, like, head shadow, is this.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard that term.
Yeah, and, just, like, being able to pinpoint where a sound is coming from is impacted when you're deaf in one ear. There's also something, w that is sort of shared with being blind in one eye or having any sort of, even being, like, autistic or having, being neurodivergent is the sort of insecurity that you might have growing up with that and how you have, like, maybe a heightened anxiety. So, for example, if you're deaf in one ear and you're a student, you might feel anxious about where you sit in a classroom to make sure that you can hear properly. And so you might be like anxious to get to a class earlier, to have a particular seat, or um, that's that sort of thing. And it sort of built, when you operate in the world with that sort of anxiety about things like that, but it permeates into everything. It affects how anxious you are as a person. So part of Enid's anxiety comes from being sort of hyper vigilant in terms of growing up as someone who didn't have complete sense of hearing.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and it, like, really perfectly leads into my next question because I know you identify as an information architect. That's, I'm not sure if that's your full-time cubicle job,
It
but
is.
it is Enid's full-time,
Yeah.
cubicle job, and as a reader, it seems she's overloaded with way too much information, and we like, this book is so focused on interiority, and we really get inside Enid's thought patterns and, you know, like the demon brain thoughts that are just circling through, that's what I call them to my therapist. And it's such like a privilege to get that lens into someone's interiority like that. And she, I mean, she was chronically online as a teen, recording her every thought. Then she listens to true crime podcasts 24/7. And of course, she like knows every interesting fact about space. So, how does like this character trait of being overloaded with information and this kind of like hypervigilance as well play into the structure of the book?
Yeah, so her being an information architect was I obviously did that partly because I am, and it was an easy, I like to be
Mhm.
sort of lazy in that way. But part of what you're saying there was being someone who is trying to make sense of things and trying to organize her thoughts and organize how she does things and to think in that way fit into that. But I'm sorry, does that what was your final part of your question there, I think?
How does like this overloading of information and hypervigilance affect the structure of the book for Enid and for you as the author of Enid?
Okay. What do you mean by structure? Like
Like
the
the I mean, there's kind of these like vignette moments, like you have these different chapters, but it's not necessarily like plot, story, like things are it's not so contained and so prescriptive. I feel like we kind of get these little glimpses and moments.
right. Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, I don't know if I thoughtfully did that, but I think there's something that could be said about the book is about facts partly, obviously, with the title, and it's about her trying to operate in the world with like a large amount of information, but she's also sort of scattered in a certain way.
Yeah.
So maybe that you could say that part of it feeds into that. I don't know if that's deliberate, but
Well, it definitely comes off as deliberate
okay,
as
great.
for sure. You're like, "Yes, I claim that."
Yeah, yeah,
Um, well, I mean, I didn't know that writing wasn't your full-time job, so now I'm curious, like, how do you kind of balance, being an author and then being a 9 to 5, I'm assuming 9 to 5-ish. What's that like? Because I struggle with that myself.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I would love to just be a writer. I'm a anxious person though, so I feel like I'm like, oh, I have to make sure that I've that I'm punctual, things like that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it is. I don't know how I think. I'm not very organized. I always want to be able to say like, well, what I do is I like
Yeah.
wake up early and I write a little bit, but I don't. I don't know. I don't do that. So I don't know what's
That's
happening.
so refreshing though. Yeah. And also, like, there are some difficult topics that you deal with in each of your books, like in terms of mental health and anxieties, and like family dynamics. Um, and, during our last chat, we kind of talked about religious trauma and as it relates to anxiety, especially with Glinda, like working in a Catholic church and, gay girl prayers coming out. Um, and I'd love to know, like, do you practice like a kind of sense of self-care when you write about these difficult topics? Like, do you kind of take breaks or is there, or do you kind of just like, it is what it is and I don't think about it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Something whenever I sit down to write a book, my intention is always to write a funny book. And then it always devolves into me writing about, depression or that kind of thing. So I think, I always tend to be writing multiple things at once.
Mhm.
Um, and because my intention is almost always this time it's just going to be funny. Like I'm going to try to write a funny book. This is going to be a happy, funny book. But then somehow that always ends up being. But because of that, I would if I am writing something that is like particularly dark or sort of like low energy. I can go to another thing that I'm writing that's maybe still in the good intention stage of trying to write something funny and get a break there. But I don't know. I guess it is kind of helpful when you're writing. And it's probably not good for you, but when you're writing something that's low or negative, to feel kind of low and negative. So I probably should be careful about that. But I do think I kind of lean into when I'm writing those parts. I'm like, okay, well, I'm a storm cloud today. This is I'm
No, I love that. And the book is really, really funny. And I'm cackling throughout most of it because I do have that like really dark sense of humor. Um, but I love the idea that you're like, I'm gonna write a happy, funny book, and then it slowly devolves. Um, so one of our Sapph-Liddies, Aviv, sent in some wonderful questions that I'd like to share with you. Um, like, how did the idea of the book come to you? Was it initially more plot, more character? Um, and they said that we could listen to Enid's point of view forever. So, wondering how you kind of balance out moving plot forward while still, keeping that interiority as well.
Yeah, so I normally think of a premise first before a character or
Mm.
even the plot. And I think I tend to write very. I think some people would probably say these are no plot books. So
I think there's plot
there's
person.
plot. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
there's something especially in the editing process, they make you. So I'm pretty confident that there's something. It's definitely on the spectrum more character. But what I do is I think of the premise first, and I like writing about mental illness, and I like writing about queer women and lesbian characters in particular. And so I had thought of the premise first, and the premise was, I had already written "Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead," which is about someone who's deeply anxious and depressed, and so this one I thought about other I thought about a phobia because that's sort of an extreme sense of anxiety, And I thought of the premise that she would have an irrational fear of bald men, and that was sort of what I went with first. And then what I tend to do is I write out what the premise is. So I wrote, this is about a character named Enid, or whatever her name was in the beginning. It probably wasn't Enid, I don't know. Um, who has an irrational fear of bald men and feels like someone's stalking her. And then I wrote the first chapter to figure out who maybe she would be. Um, and then, yeah, and the stalking part is sort of what is driving the story. But it's also supposed to, my intention with that was to show, because she also has this fear of intimacy, right? So she's afraid of getting close to people. She thinks something's wrong with her. She thinks she has this parasite, right? She thinks she's afraid she's a bad person. And so her fear that someone is, for example, breaking into her house is supposed to correspond with her getting closer with Polly. So, for
Mhm.
example, the first time that she meets Polly, she notices that her window is open and she didn't open it. So she's like, oh, and that's, that's sort of partially moving the idea that maybe someone is looking in her window open, but it's also in my, my little way, I'm trying to also say, she's met Polly. And then as the story progresses, like, for example, when the first night she stays over at Polly's house, when she comes back to her apartment, it really looks like someone broke in. That's supposed to correspond with what's happening there. So it was helpful to make, as a less plot kind of writer, it's helpful to make something like that, like a relationship, or like something like that, correspond with what is driving the story, because it helped, drive it.
I love that, and I did not notice that upon my first reading of it. I Every time I talk to an author, I'm like, I have to go back immediately. I am so simple-minded. I'm just there for the vibe. And then I'm like, wait, there's all this cool stuff. Okay, thank you for sharing that. And I mean, the bald men bit, when I knew I would love this book, when I read the back and I was like, irrational fear of bald men, it's so random and so specific and so fucking funny. I was like, I know I'm gonna love it. So I'm curious, why bald men? Um, and then also, do you have any irrational fears like that that might have like inspired that choice?
Yeah, so I looked up, it's a legitimate phobia that people have, because I had decided she would have an irrational fear. And then
Yeah.
I was looking up irrational fears, and again, my intention was, I'm going to try to make it funny. So I was reading like lists of phobias people have, and that one came up, and I thought, oh, that's kind of funny. I have since had some minor regrets, because there have been, um, I've been in rooms where there's bald men, and I'm like, oh man, like I hope I'm always like, sorry, this
Yeah,
isn't,
sorry, this wasn't personal.
it's not. And I did like intentionally, there's a part where someone like assures her, I met lots of really nice bald men and things like that, to try to balance it out. But yeah, yeah, I picked it because I thought it sounded funny, and I thought it would be, there's certain phobias that would be harder to work with, right? I wanted it to be something that was like, being bald men is, there are bald men all over the place, and
There
but they're
are.
not
They're
everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah.
I also love that, I mean, it's kind of like parallel to like Glinda being an atheist and then like working in a Catholic church. And then I don't know, there's something with Enid being a lesbian and like having this phobia of bald men. Like it's not just like I'm like not just writing off men, but like specifically bald men, get the fuck away from me. Like very, very targeted. I loved it personally. Um, okay, so you very, very kindly sent me an advanced copy of the book, which you dedicated to interesting facts about Sapph-Lit. I literally cried when I opened this. It was so sweet. So thank you for sending that to me. It made me feel very special. And then I get the hardcover and it looks different. So I would love to know what happened. They're both gorgeous. I love both of them very, very much, but there are slight differences. There's like a woman in the window here, and then we have kind of a shooting star, like the font changed, the kind of style changed. Why did that change happen? Did you want it to happen? What's the cover process like? Just tell me everything because I'm such a visual person. Curious.
So I'm not fully in the loop about everything, but the way that I think, so take this with a grain of salt, because and I also have a bad memory. So what I remember is that I think when it I guess when it was an arc, it was shared with, this is what I don't know, like buyers or something. This is, I don't know the language. Who gave the feedback that they thought it would be nice for it to look more related. I have them here, to everyone in this room, for there to be like a sort of
Oh.
more of like a
Like
visual.
painterly, kind of sketchy, like flowy,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
so
So it's the
transparent.
same font, for example, and yeah, that's what it was. It was, let's make it look a little bit more tied to this. But to
Mhm.
be honest, while they were doing this, they also came up, like while they were revisiting the title, they came up with a lot of even very, very different ones.
Mm,
And I think they'll probably use one of those. I don't know, but there's for the paperback, yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I love the transition from a hardcover to a paperback cover.
Right.
And I love both covers of Everyone in This Room because the hardcover is like more like rabbits kind of dancing across the page, and then you transition to like this figure that you showed. So yeah, very curious to see what the paperback of this looks like.
Me too.
Um, I'm an art history girly. I love a good visual cover. I am very pro judging a book by this cover. Um, okay, so I adored the kind of like metaphor or signal or whatever you want to call it, where Enid would tell her mother, "Your house is dirty, you need to put on lipstick," or "You're not wearing lipstick." And this kind of checks in on her mental health status. So this is a bit of a departure from the way that Gilda's parents were constantly pretending everything was fine and being vocally adamant that nothing was wrong with anyone, including and especially their own children. But it also still shows that kind of like sense of avoidance and like refusal to name something specifically. So what did you want to illustrate between this mother-daughter relationship where Enid often becomes a kind of caretaker?
Yeah, so with everyone in this room will someday be dead, the main character's struggle is the folk, like their mental health problems. But with interesting facts about space, it is partly Enid's, her phobia and her anxiety, and she clearly has mental health problems. But I also wanted to show the impact of what it's like to have someone you care about be depressed. So originally, my intention with their relationship uh, was to um, was to write more in this one about how you might be impacted by someone else being depressed, who you care about, for example. But Enid's character is also, like you were saying, she's avoidant, and she has this fear of being, close to people in a way that would make it hard to be direct and to say things like "I'm worried about you," because that feels too like earnest. So rather than because she doesn't have like the stomach to do that, she has to veil it with comments like, your house is dirty and you're not wearing lipstick. And I think that is, I think in reality, the way that we talk about mental health often, particularly with, I mean, always, but with people in older generations, is there is this avoidance to call it what it is and to like address it head on. And yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And there's so many family dynamics in here, some that get like a little bit messy. You have Polly and Joan, the polyamorous couple that Enid goes on a kind of platonic date with. And then of course Enid's dad, mom, half-sister, stepmom, like niece. What made you include, more of these relationships? And was it fun kind of having your main character navigate all of these different like I don't want to say messy, but like these really real family dynamics.
Yeah, I think particularly with the half sisters, a lot of what I was trying to show with those relationships is like Enid is sort of surrounded by people who do care about her and who generally aren't, there's some, but who generally aren't, she has this fear that she's a bad person and she shouldn't get close to people. And but in reality, the people around her want to be close. Like even these half sisters, for example, they want to have a relationship with her, and and the same with Vin. And yeah, I was trying to show sort of like the interconnectedness of these relationships, and uh, how when you close yourself off to people, um, that why that's not good.
Maybe don't. Love it. So we have a really good question in the chat that I want to share before we move on. Jesse says, how did the idea of having a parasite come about as a metaphor for our less admirable characteristics as human beings? I feel like you put my own feelings into words. Like, yes, exactly that.
Oh, thanks. I couldn't really say exactly what made me think of that. I do remember writing, like there's a part um, where she says like she thinks there's like the physical manifestation of that is in her, is like, I was thinking about Plankton from SpongeBob, which is in there, right? Even I think I maybe I was somehow watching SpongeBob and saw Plankton and thought that guy reminds me of the bad part of myself, something like that. But I don't remember truthfully what inspired that. I do remember I had written the book that wasn't in it in the first draft, so that was something I added after. Uh, I think I added it before I shared it with anybody though. But my personal first draft, I don't think had that, and I think I wanted it to be more like a little bit more concrete that she has this parasite, so it was easy to just make him a little guy.
He's just a little guy. My mom never let me watch SpongeBob. She said it would make me stupid. Um, and my entire life, me and my older brother have like resented our mom for it because we have missed out. I mean, not really, like we make fun of her for it. It's ridiculous. But like I miss out on so many memes and references and like my partner's like a big SpongeBob person. I don't like math. Like he just watched a lot growing up and he like references it all the time and I'm like, I don't get it. But Plankton I did understand. So thank you for including an accessible reference to it.
Okay, good, yeah. I didn't
Um,
even get to watch it either. My little brother watched it though.
okay.
So
I just ruined my childhood. She did. Ruined. No, I'm kidding. Oh, is there a reaction from a reader that has stood out to you for this book specifically?
I've gotten like a sort of surprising number of messages that say they like from my I think they mean it. They have a fear saying they have a fear of bald men. Like it's I get this funny this like mix of the idea that that's like an absurd phobia with like I'm like at least 5 messages from people being like, "Thank you so much for representing my my phobia of bald men." I'm like, "Oh, no problem."
I am obsessed with that. I hope you keep getting messages like that for like the rest of your life because that is like a lasting legacy deserved. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the rapid fire round, and if anyone listening has questions, drop them in the chat. We'll pop them on at the end if we have time, but we probably will. Okay, what is your favorite interesting fact about space?
Okay, my favorite, I think my favorite facts are ones that are more like what was kind of hard with this book is I wanted to write little, quick ones because I didn't want to write like like a 4 pages that were like gravity around a like, I didn't want to like
Yeah.
but truthfully, I find the the information I was reading about gravity being relative and how when if like an analog clock were closer to the event horizon of a black hole, it would tick at a slower rate than a clock on Earth, that sort of thing. Um, I find that really interesting. The idea of time and space. I'm like, um, I think that maybe is like the answer to everything. There's something in there that's like that's what we got to get to the bottom of. So probably
Yeah,
something in.
I love black hole facts. I think black holes are fascinating. I listened to a whole like public radio lab like episode about black
Okay.
holes. I'll send it to you. I think you would actually really like
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you organize your books at home? Color, author, Dewey Decimal System, genre. What is your library like?
It's good. I went to school to be a librarian, so I should do Dewey Decimal, but I don't. I have my own personal system, which is I have a section where I'm like, these are books I loved. So those
Mhm.
are the ones that I loved. And this is maybe I partly probably do this because sometimes I have to like film myself for things. And I'm
Mhm.
like, that's the part of the shelves that I'll have behind me. Cause when you look behind. Um, and then I have a section where it's like books. Hopefully no one examines my bookshelves too much with this, but another section where I'm like, these are mid.
Ed. Yeah.
These And then another one where it's like these are books I read. I was an English major, so these are like my English major. A few of those make it to the ones I like,
Yeah.
but most of them don't. Most of those are in the English major land, and like children's books in one section, and poetry, but it's mostly. I also have like a section of books that are like these are books that in my early 20s. I used to read a lot, like, and I'm not proud of this, but like the character Jess from Gilmore Girls. So my books were like,
Yeah.
like Bukowski and
Yeah.
like things that I'm
They were
not.
they were pick me girl books.
They were kind of pick me
Yeah.
girl books, or I don't know what was going
I
on.
also read Bukowski at 23 for a
Yeah,
boy.
I was
Um,
kind of, well, yeah, it wasn't for a boy for me. I don't know what it was.
you're like, I'm so esoteric.
I don't know what I think I was just like things were different then too. Also, though I'm a little, but yeah, I don't know what I was doing. But so I have a section of those.
Yeah.
Some of which I like. I consider a Confederacy of Dunces one of those, for example, and I love that book. I think that's a really funny book, but it's still in that section.
Yeah, totally understand. Oh my God, I need a picture of this bookshelf. Okay, who would be a better girlfriend? Gilda or Enid?
Oh, oh, it really depends on your preferences. Um, I gotta say Enid for myself personally because
Mm.
Guild is so not like, and I mean depending on the stage in the story or her progress after, but Enid is more functioning. Enid is able to, she would be kind of a mean girlfriend because
Oh, 100%.
it would probably not be good mentally, but at least you wouldn't, be worried about her no longer existing, I guess. I don't know. Well, no, you maybe would a little actually, even that, but no, not as much. So yeah, Enid.
Yeah. Okay, love. So this question relates more to gay girl prayers, but I know you revisited the Bible to write those poems, and I can't resist asking you another religious question with my religious trauma, of course, in mind. What is your favorite Bible passage, character, story?
I got an answer for that. It's the mother of harlots and
Mhm,
abominations of the earth. She's in Revelations.
mhm.
There's this passage where this woman, uh, who's the whore of Babylon, comes out on a big, like giant monster,
Uh-huh.
and it's like she's like covered in diamonds and pearls, and we're supposed to think like this is the worst.
He sounds hot.
She is so hot. She's so hot. So yeah, Revelations. I don't know. I can't cite the passage, but the whore of Babylon, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. That's the
Mm,
that's the best one. Yeah.
beautiful. I'm gonna Google that after this because
Yeah.
I want to see like any artistic representations of that because that sounds amazing. Okay, what are you currently reading?
I haven't been reading enough, right? Because I've been preoccupied with having a book out, which is one of the depressing parts of having. But what have I read? I read not long ago. I read a book called "Never Been Better," which was written by Leanne Toshiko Simpson, and it's a book that is like Silver Linings Playbook esque,
Mm.
where and I think this is fine to say because this was written in the material shared with me, but the author has had experience being in a psychiatric ward, and the story is about these three people who met in a psychiatric ward like a year ago, and two of them are getting married, and one of them thinks that she's in love with the guy in the couple. So it's like, and it's a good, like, it's funny, but it's also kind of, it's like it's very of the tone Silver Linings.
Yeah. Dark humor, messy,
Yeah, but also not so. But there's also like a bit of
lightness.
lightness. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
love that.
it's a good read.
What is a book that you are recommending everyone to read?
A book I'm recommending everyone to read. Hmm, that's a good one. Too literal, because when you say that, I'm like, I wouldn't recommend that to my Oma, but um, what do I like
We're recommending the most.
recommending the most? A Safe Girl to Love by Casey Plett is a it's centers trans women. It's Casey's a Canadian writer who I'm a big fan of, and yeah, A Safe Girl to Love. That's a good one.
Love.
Yeah.
Um, if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Okay, who would it be? Lately I've been listening to a lot of Tracy Chapman and watching like old videos of Tracy Chapman, and uh, I would love to chat with her. I think she's got, especially when you watch like old interviews of a time period where you could tell she was kind of like having to restrain some of her responses. I wonder what her actual response would have been. And yeah, Tracy Chapman.
That is such a good answer. Okay, favorite sapphic movie and or TV show? Like anything you're watching that's sapphic that you're loving.
Right now, what would that be? I mean, I always think of like I like Dairy Girls a lot. Um, I can't think of a current one. What are our current sapphic shows? Do we have any right now?
That's the sad part. We don't
Yeah,
really.
sad.
I'm patiently waiting for more Yellow Jackets. I think
Okay.
season 3 is.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one that I have. I mean, I'm also obsessed with cannibalism. That's a known fact. So it's like my best interest, like lesbians and cannibals. Beautiful.
Yeah. Did you see there was a movie recently about cannibals that what was it
Oh,
called?
the plane crash one.
I don't think it was a plane crash, and I can't even remember who was in it, but I went to the movie not knowing it was a cannibal movie.
Love it. That's
It
the
was
best kind of movie.
it was like pitched like it was just like one of those days where you're like, oh, we could go to the movie. What's this movie about? And I think I liked the actors in it, but now I can't even remember who they were. But it was like this is a road trip movie, and then
Oh, was it Bones and All?
yes, it was bones and all.
What good. I loved it.
It was good, but I had no idea. Like the first scene where she cannibalizes someone, I was like, I was like,
Yeah,
this is
no, because you think that it's going to be like a sapphic kiss and like you think it's going to be really
yeah.
gay, and then she bites her fucking finger off. Spoiler.
Yeah, it
It's
was
amazing.
it was really amazing, but I was also so unprepared for it to be a cannibal movie that I was like, "What?" I was like, "What just happened?"
Speaking
It certainly made it better, but
Speaking of Timothy Chalamet,
it's Timothée Chalamet, yeah.
my 96-year-old grandmother, when Call Me by Your Name came out, went to the theater not knowing it was gay
Oh,
by herself. And she's like 90 something years old, like toddling in, and she's sat in between two people. And like, she doesn't know I'm gay, but she's not like like outwardly homophobic. She's just 96 years old. And she didn't feel like she could leave. So she just covered her eyes the whole time.
no.
Anyways,
Scene.
um, okay. We're gonna move on to chat questions. Okay, we got a few. Um, can you ask about how you've seen growth from Oh Honey to Interesting Facts? Do you see parallels and similarities in each novel?
Yeah, I think there's definitely like I think my writing style is that sort of like snippet way of writing, and sometimes I tell myself, "Oh, you should stop," but I that's the way that I write. So that I think there's obviously like a like maybe the same sense of humor, right? I think with Oh Honey, um, that something that I and I this might be wrong, but I think with everyone in this room, something that changed in the way I was writing is that I was more earnest. I think like there was more. I would have like with Oh Honey, I don't think there's any. thing in that novella that is like the character is so cold and so held off from things, and that's part of her character, and that's the point. But there's no, it's very not vulnerable at all. Uh, and like not that these other ones are, but a little bit more, like there's a little bit more earnestness, I think. And that would be, that's a big and I can see from my own writing outside of that, like the things that never, you know, saw the light of day, that I used to write um much more sort of cold. And maybe that was because my intention was for it to be funny or whatever, and so I avoided certain things, but it wasn't or you know, I liked to write something more dark. But I sort of leaned a little bit more into the light and the earnesty, I think. And the other thing with so that's one thing. And then so that's from Oh Honey to Interesting Facts, but from Everyone in This Room to Interesting Facts, something that came out through the editing process of Everyone in This Room, as I was they the feedback I got from people, from editors, was that and this came from a lot of editors. So when that book was being published, before it was published, I had all these phone calls with editors from different publishing houses. Oops, sorry. And they all, and in those phone calls, they sort of tell you, this is what I would do with your book, right? This is what I would
Mhm.
do. And their feedback was all different. But one thing that was the same throughout all of them was about the relationship between Gilda and Eleanor. They wanted more of that relationship.
Mm.
And then as I was editing the book, that's what I worked on a lot, was like put more of that in there. And I was like, why am I having a hard time writing anything about um, their relationship? Like, why can't I write about that? And then I read All About Love by Bell Hooks. And there's this line where she says,
Yeah.
yeah, or she says something about, I mean, there was a lot of insight in there, but there was something along the lines of, being a woman and feeling like you could write about death because no one doubts your ability to write about death, but not being able to write about love. And I was like, oh man, I'm doing that. I'm not, I'm having a hard time writing about that. So with Interesting Facts About Space, I was intentionally trying to write about, you know, that sort of, I was sort of writing about a relationship and someone being afraid of being, you know, of love, I guess. Yeah.
I love that so much. Bell Hooks really kicks people upside the head,
Yeah.
like, with that book when
Yeah.
you find it.
Yeah.
It's a
Worth her reading.
revelation for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely worth.
Um, Not the Bible pun. Okay, Nora asks, "What's your favorite dialogue line you wrote for Enid?"
You know what? I wish I remembered anything like that. I would, it would be really hard for me to say that I even like uh but let me think. What would she say? I guess I liked writing her interactions with Maverick, the guy at work who's you know, isn't reading her well, and is I like writing like a back and forth sort of conversation, particularly when Enid is thinking something differently than she's saying. I like that kind of oh, and there's one part where she's in that meeting, she's in a meeting with people at work, and she asks someone to repeat themselves, and he does, and she doesn't understand, and she's like, got it. I like that. That was fun.
Yeah. No, that is my inner monologue a lot of the time when I'm in these settings and I'm like, "Hey, can you clarify this?" And they're like, "Yes, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Great, don't understand a single
Got
thing."
it. Yeah.
Jesse asks, "Are you a fan of Interstellar?"
You know, I have seen that, but it's been a while, so I can't say strongly. I can't remember. I think so.
Carmina asks, "Do you have an irrational fear yourself?"
You know what? I do, but I don't want to say.
Well, Madison asks, "Can you share some of the top books on that shelf?"
Oh yeah, let me just a sec. Let me look. Oh, I'll just grab a handful of them.
Love.
All right, let's go a little Pizza Girl. That's a great one. Have you folks read this? This is a
No, it's been in a few polls. I have a copy. Maybe it'll go in a future
it's about,
vote.
it's about a pizza delivery driver who becomes obsessed with this woman that she delivers pizzas to.
Sounds
That
great.
one's great. All My Puny Sorrows by Miriam Taves. Miriam Taves is a really good writer. She's really funny, and she writes about characters who she grew up Mennonite, so
Oh,
interesting thing. I've got a Tessa Mossfa in there,
Mhm.
Bunny. I liked Bunny.
Love.
Yeah, yeah.
Incredible. We love unhinged women at the end of the day. Okay, Brianna asks, I can specifically relate to the experience of having very little memory of teenage slash preteen years and going back and watching YouTube videos I made, then to jog my memory of a time I feel I've lost a bit there. There are no original experiences in this life. Is there a reason that you chose that specific way, rewatching childhood YouTube videos, to reflect on themes in memory and trauma, specifically Enid viewing it as a form of self-harm? It was a very effective part of the book for me.
Yeah, I didn't have that experience, but, I I do have this experience of having, like, artifacts from being that age,
Mm.
particularly emails. I used to, like, my friends and I would, I have this old email that I had since, like, grade 7, and I can see the email chains and the conversations we had, and we would write each other letters like they were like letters. And there's also things in there like little video clips from like when we were using our webcams or whatever, and
Mhm.
little like pictures we took. And it goes from that little age to through high school. And there's also things like, I found an old book I wrote in there when I was a teenager and that kind of thing, and so I was kind of reflecting on, like, being able to see this version of yourself that you're not anymore with, like, no recollection of being that person, like, especially the emails. I grew up in, like, a relatively small community, and so the people that I reference in those emails, I know what's happened to them. Like, I know they're like, that lady is, a teacher or whatever now, and I had this thought about her that I don't recall having, for example, like, we were talking about people and things like that, um my friends and I were very close, so we expressed our insecurities and things like your real most innermost thoughts. And I don't remember having them at all. Like, I don't remember. It's as if reading, I was a little kid also, but yeah. So it's partly from that, I think,
Yeah, that is so interesting. That's such a wonderful archive.
in some ways, but it's also awful.
Yeah, no,
Kind
100%.
of
Like,
all
for me, the equivalent of that is, like, going back to my Google Docs from, like, early high school and, like, the yearning poetry that I wrote about people and,
Yeah.
like journal entries from that time. It's very highly, highly embarrassing. I was a big journaler, like, I journaled literally every single day all throughout high school. Very painful to reread.
Still
I
have.
I
That's
still
right.
have them, yeah.
That's good.
Devastating. It's devastating. So yeah, I understand. Okay, so Tori asks, I connected to Enid with her need to always be listening to something, for example, podcasts, to prevent thought spirals. Is that something you connect to, or do you have thoughts on the cultural phenomena and um and our obsession with murder podcasts?
Yeah, I do think, yeah, so I went through like a phase of consuming a huge, like a lot of people do, consuming a huge amount of true crime.
Mm.
And 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 I think like a lot of people, I also reached that stage where I'm like, ooh, is this ethical, kind of, like, if this were a story about someone I know being murdered, would I like that this is being consumed in this sort of entertainment type way? And then I thought about, why we consume true crime, and read a lot about that. There's a lot of interesting things published, particularly around how women read true crime to as the sort of coping mechanism. It sort of there was one thing I read that said it gives us this sense that it didn't happen to us, which is sort of
Yeah.
soothing. Um, and yeah, so I was thinking a lot about that, and like I said earlier, I like to think about things that I already sort of have in my, like, I wrote about the Catholic Church 'cause I was raised Catholic, and I Enid's an information architect because, and maybe one of your earlier questions about balancing a day job and stuff is that what you do is you just take little shortcuts and don't choose a topic you don't know about and write about that. So I was thinking about my own experience as being someone who consumed a lot of true crime, and if related a lot to the story because the story is so much about fear, and
Mhm.
that's obviously a real,
Yeah, the fear of stalking as well, like becoming someone who would be on one of those podcasts. And that, yeah, I consume a lot of true crime documentaries.
uh,
Um, but also like I'm less interested in like kind of true crime docs and podcasts as I am in like cults and like
Oh
fun
yeah.
lists.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I lean more that. But no, that's like what me and my girlfriends do whenever they come over to my apartment. Like we have a glass of wine or three or four, and we watch the creepiest, most disturbing documentaries. And it's
Yeah.
like, and then we dissect it like bit by bit. Um,
I think even that, yeah, like the dissecting part really does lend to the idea that it is sort of a way to like learn from it kind of. You're like, well, what would I do if I
yeah,
learned this
yeah,
information?
100%.
Can I take from this that I can apply? Yeah.
Well, that was the end of all the questions. Emily, do you feel like I didn't ask you anything or anything you want to share with the class? Anything you want to say?
Thanks for having me. I really thanks for reading my book. It's really nice of you.
Of course. I enjoyed this so much. I pleasure to see you again, and thank you for just taking the time. Thank you for supporting the Sapph-Lit merch. Yeah, it was just like such a joy to read this with the community. Like everyone adored it, and it's like your books are the ones that people, I mean, the unhinged, mentally ill sapphics all come to Sapph-Lit, I guess, and we just have a grand old time reading your books.
Thanks so much. I'm glad to have found you here.
Oh yeah, no, you definitely found a home in Sapph-Lit for sure. So yeah, have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. Thank you everyone for joining, and yeah, see you soon. Bye.